Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Well, hello and welcome to a new episode of Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Today's topic is all about choosing your wedding suppliers and knowing what order to make these decisions. But speaking of wedding suppliers, last week's episode was all about wedding supplier meals. So if you have any questions about which suppliers should get a meal at your wedding and when to serve them, what to serve, we covered all of that in last week's episode. So I highly recommend catching up if you've missed that. But let's come back to today's topic, and it's all about the order that you make certain wedding decisions so that you do things right. And I've learned this from experience that there are some mistakes that you could unintentionally make if you do things in the wrong order, and I can save you the hassle and the stress of making these mistakes if you listen to today's episode. My first piece of advice is to download our wedding planning checklist, because that will help you to know which decisions to make and when. So I'm going to unpack some of the things that are in the checklist in today's episode, but I'm also going to drop a link to the checklist in the notes for this episode so you can have a full 12-month wedding planning checklist. And of course, if you're getting married in less than 12 months or more than 12 months, you can customize the checklist so that it fits for your wedding timeline. But for the most part, the order is what you really want to focus on. So let's get into it. Before you choose any wedding suppliers, there's one very, very big thing that you need to do, and that is to choose the type of wedding you want to have. So if you think about it, you can't really book a venue or create your save the dates or find the decor that you like if you don't know what type of wedding you want to have. And now, you, being the person listening to the episode, may have an idea in your head of what kind of wedding you have. And maybe you've pictured things and you've seen some photos on Instagram, or you've seen videos on TikTok, or even things on Pinterest, and you've got a bit of a visual in your mind of what your wedding will look like. I highly recommend beginning the entire wedding planning journey by sitting down with your partner and together coming up with a bit of an idea of what you both want your wedding to be like. Here are some questions that you can ask yourselves to help put this to words and to get a bit of a visual that you both agree on. Things like, do we want a big wedding or something more intimate? Now, this question is really helpful because if you want something intimate, then you're going to find wedding venues that are perfect for an intimate wedding. And if you want something bigger, then you need to find a venue that can accommodate a big guest list. Another question, something like, do we want something traditional or something a little bit different? Again, this has an impact on what you do at your wedding, but also your wedding venue. Questions like, what type of ceremony do we want? So if you are a religious couple, maybe you already are part of a church and you want to get married in your church, that kind of helps with the direction of your wedding ceremony location, but also the type of things that you would incorporate into your ceremony. And maybe you are not religious and you want to get married in a garden or another kind of really beautiful venue. Those types of things can really help you to start piecing together some of the elements of your wedding. Another question, are we paying using our savings, or are we going to take out a loan, or are we expecting any contributions from friends or family? So this question will really help you to start piecing together what your budget could look like. And we'll talk a little bit later about how the budget impacts the decisions that you make. So we'll come back to that one. And another question, are we set on a weekend wedding, or are we open to something a little bit different? So I'm going to walk you through the next step, which is all about the wedding date, where we'll unpack this one a little bit more. So first decision is choosing the type of wedding that you want to have. Then you can start setting a date, and then you can begin planning. So as you can tell, we haven't even gotten into which suppliers to choose and the order to do that, because there's so many decisions you need to make before you can even get to that point. So when it comes to setting a date, there are a few things you want to consider. First thing, what time of year do you want to get married? Do you want to get married in the warmer months? Are you set on a summer wedding? Does it need to be a Saturday? Those types of things. Really consider. Do you have any special dates, such as your anniversary? So I went to a wedding a few years ago where the couple got married on their 10-year dating anniversary, and it was a Saturday, and it was just perfect timing for them. So consider if there are any dates like that, like your anniversary or your parents' anniversary, or maybe there's a bank holiday coming up and you want to get married on the bank holiday, and then you know that every year coming up you're getting married on or around a bank holiday, and that's when you can celebrate your anniversary. Think about how long you want to be engaged for. That can really play into the decision that you make. If you want to have a short engagement, then you're looking for dates in a particular time frame. If you want to specifically have a long engagement, because maybe you're still saving up for your wedding and there are a few things that you want to get together first, consider that, because that will help you to narrow down the year that you want to get married and probably the month and roughly the time of the year as well. And then the final thing when it comes to setting a date is considering your wedding venue. So I've said this before, that your date and your wedding venue is a little bit of a chicken or egg situation. Which one comes first? And there's no wrong way to do it. It really depends on your priorities as a couple. One way is to set a date, and that is your wedding date. So when you're looking at wedding venues, you're only considering the ones that are available on your wedding date. The other option is, if your date is not something you're very precious about, you could begin by finding your wedding venue and you see when they're available, and then you choose the date based on what the venue has to offer. It really just depends on your priority. If your priority is the date, then that's the decision maker. And if your priority is actually finding a really amazing venue, then that will be the decision maker. So for you, make that decision on which option you want to go for, and then you can take it from there. But before you book your wedding venue, and therefore before you choose your date, there is another decision that you've got to make, and that has to do with your guest list. Now, you don't need to make a whole detailed guest list. You don't need to break it down into your A list, your B list, your C list. All we're looking for is a rough idea of how many guests you want at your wedding. So what you don't want to do is book a wedding venue and find out that they have space for X amount of guests, and then you go and start creating your guest list and you realize, oh no, we actually have about 3 times as many people that we want at our wedding and we can't fit them in the venue. So I recommend creating a rough guest list. That's jotting down roughly who you want there. Go through things like your family on both sides. Don't forget to include your parents in the conversation, because they may have some family members that they would like to invite that you haven't thought of. And that's a whole separate thing we can cover on another day, just how to navigate that. But think about your work friends, your church friends, your friends from school or uni, any sports clubs that you're part of, and any friends from there that you want to invite. Just have a think about all those people and you'll have a bit of an idea. Even if it's not set in stone and it's not an exact number, you'll know if you're having under 100 people or more than 200 people, that kind of thing. Just a ballpark is what you want. And then when you start looking for venues, you know the kind of capacity that you're trying to find. Now, just on the guest list, here's a tip. Don't send out any save the dates to anybody on the guest list until you have your date and your wedding venue booked. What you don't want to do, as I mentioned before, you don't want to book a venue and then realize that your guests can't fit into the venue. But you also don't want to send a save the date to a guest and then find a venue that actually ticks all the boxes except for something like the capacity. And then you realize that actually you want to tweak your guest list based on what the venue can accommodate. You can't uninvite guests, but you can have a rough guest list that you've written down and you can make tweaks to that and no one will know. So don't save the dates until you've got your dates and your venue booked. Next item, before we even get to the suppliers, is to have a chat about your budget. So we mentioned earlier that you want to have a conversation with your partner about where the money is coming from. Is it from your savings? Are you taking out a loan? Do you have friends or family members that want to contribute to the wedding? There's a whole separate conversation about how to navigate that, because budgets they're not pretty, but they're very important and you need to have a conversation about them. So my recommendation is to have even just a rough idea of your budget, and then you know what types of suppliers you can actually look for. So what you don't want to be doing is shopping for wedding venues that are well outside of your price range, because all you're going to do is you're going to show yourself venues that are amazing that you just can't afford to have. So you can certainly look at the venues, ask what the prices are, but really filter out the ones that are outside of your budget. Okay, so now that we have covered the type of wedding you want to have, we know the date range that you want to go for, at least the time of year that you want to get married. We have an idea of the guest list, kind of rough idea, and we also have an idea of the budget. Those are the building blocks that will help to make the decisions that will really help you to book your wedding suppliers, which is the final step in this first stage of the wedding planning process. And that is to find the big hitters. Now, the big hitters they're the important suppliers that your wedding cannot function without them. So, of course, there will be many, many suppliers that you need to book. You know, things like your makeup artist and hairstylist. You want to look good, but we wouldn't classify those very important suppliers as the big hitters because you can book them later down the line and they don't book up quite as quickly as the ones that I'm going to mention. So the big hitters are very important suppliers where their availability will determine when you get married. If you are, like I said earlier, if you're flexible on your date, some of these suppliers will be the ones that you are happy to change your plans for. Other ones are just very important because the day can't go on without them. So I'm going to list the big hitters, but remember, you can't book any of these until you know the type of wedding you want to have, what you can afford, how many guests you're having, when you're getting married, all of those things. So these are the big hitters. Your wedding venue. Of course, that's a big one. You can't really book many things until you know that your wedding venue is secure, because that helps you to determine the area that you're getting married in, and it helps to solidify the date and also the kind of aesthetic of your wedding, because your wedding venue will help to piece that together. Your next big hitter, and these aren't necessarily in order, this is just phase one of who you're booking. Next one is your entertainment. So that is actually every kind of entertainment that you're having. That's your ceremony music, that is your pre-drinks music, or it's a comedian, or it's the fireworks you're having at the end of the day. All the entertainment that you're having, you want to consider that in the first phase of your wedding because it helps to piece together the building blocks of what your wedding will be like. Next up, your wedding planner. Of course, your wedding planner needs to be one of the first people that you book because they can really help you to piece together everything that you're trying to achieve for your wedding. And bonus, your wedding planner knows a lot of great suppliers and can recommend people to you, and can often get you really good discounts too because of the working relationships that they've got. Next big hitter is your wedding photographer and wedding videographer. I list them both because they're both important. What you don't want to do is get to, 2 weeks before the wedding and go, I actually do want a videographer, and then hope that someone really good is available. So think about that early on. Next is your stationery supplier, because of course, if you're sending out save the dates and invitations early on, you need someone to help bring the plans to life, put them on paper, and then to be able to send them out to your guests. Your outfits, I'm putting them as big hitters because you need to know what you're wearing, and the aesthetic of your wedding will help to choose what type of outfits you wear. My only piece of advice on this one is if you're having a particularly long engagement, you don't want to get your outfits too soon. For example, if you're engaged for 3 years, you don't want to book your wedding dress and buy your dress in the first month and then it doesn't fit you or it's out of style by the time your day comes around. But you do want to have an idea of what you want to wear quite early on. And then finally, your last big hitter is your celebrant or solemnizer. These are the people who will help to make your wedding legal if you're getting legally married on the day, or if you're getting legally married before the day and you're going to have a symbolic wedding ceremony. Either way, your ceremony is a very big part of the festivities. It's not just a party, it's a wedding. You're exchanging vows. You're going to be having very special moments in your wedding ceremony. So you don't want to leave that to the last minute. You want to think about your ceremony early on. So I'm going to do a little quick recap for you. So before you can start booking your suppliers, you want to know what type of wedding you want to have. You want to talk about your date. You want to have a rough idea of your guest list, at least how many people you want to have there. You want to look at your budget. Again, just a ballpark of the kind of budget that you've got available to you, and then start booking your big hitters. I'm going to leave a link in the notes to a checklist that's going to help you make all of these winning planning decisions, so you don't have to panic. You don't have to worry about the hundreds of things you've got to do, but it really helps you to make good decisions at the right time. Come back next week because we're starting a 3-part series all about wedding websites. Wedding websites are an amazing space to communicate information that just does not fit on your wedding invitation. We're not going to talk about how to build the wedding website or which platforms to use, but it's all about the content. It's how to communicate information really well in a very straightforward way, but in a way that's still polite to your guests. Well, thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays with the Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.